There are preferred narratives in the media today, and I think that is a really, of all the consequences in the media today, the preferred narrative is exactly that. Joe Biden was fine until he wasn't. Hunter Biden's laptop was disinformation until it wasn't. Russia collusion was real until it wasn't. Today's journalists are handout journalists. They wait for the handout to come, and that's how preferred narratives get sustained by those who are the spin meisters inside of administration. Curious reporters don't wait for the handout to come. They don't wait for people to come forward. They go get the information. They go find out, hey, if the FBI is in possession of Hunter Biden's laptop, is it really Russian disinformation? And I was able to get that answered in 2020. It took the rest of the media until 2022 and 2023 to come to that recognition. When Condi Rice stood up a couple days after 9/11 and said, no one envisioned flying a plane into a building, I said, that's not possible. And of course, I was able to find out that going all the way back to 1993, Al-Qaeda was talking about flying planes into buildings. And that led me down a path of unraveling a lot of the failures of the 9/11 era. You have to be curious, and today's reporters are more interested in keeping the status quo, getting to their book parties, than being curious enough to challenge official narratives.
All right, guys, I hope you had a very thoughtful Memorial Day weekend, an opportunity to reflect on the sacrifice that so many have made to give us the freedom that we have. I was, as you probably saw, a little occupied at the end of last week. I jumped on the USS New York, took the ship from Norfolk to New York to celebrate Fleet Week. What a moving experience. Here we are, taking the ship into New York along the Hudson, going by the Statue of Liberty. You can see the guns out there, water guns, welcome us into the harbor. What a moving moment. Opportunity to talk to so many sailors about why they serve, what's going on in the country right now. Unbelievable. Trump was at Arlington yesterday with Vice President Vance, Secretary Hegseth, visiting the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and having an opportunity to talk and address the country as far as what his priorities were. They actually put out a brand new ad that has both Trump and Pete Hegseth, making it very clear what our country's priorities are. Peace through strength. Take a look.
No more distractions. No more electric tanks. No more gender confusion. No more climate change worship. We are laser focused on our mission of warfighting.
We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. It's called peace through strength.
You look into the eyes of these young Americans who are giving up the best years of their life in a uniform to serve their nation. They are incredible.
Through our power and might, we will lead the world to peace. Our friends will respect us, our enemies will fear us, and the whole world will admire the unrivaled greatness of the United States military. We will replenish the pride of our armed forces, end the recruitment crisis.
We don't fight because we hate what's in front of us. We fight because we love what's behind us.
God bless you. God bless our armed forces. God bless our men and women serving overseas. And God bless the United States of America.
You know, as we celebrate the 200th anniversary of the Navy, the Army, and get ready to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the country, that sends chills down your spine. It should anyway, but that talks about the difference and the change in the focus of where we're taking our military. By the way, a couple quick updates. House, obviously, you probably know, passed the big, beautiful bill. It heads to the Senate. This is going to be really interesting how this plays out, because there's some Senate's going to make some tweaks, and then we've got to figure out how do we get this thing over the last hurdle so that we can not just get passed, but go into effect. Because I think politically everything is on the line. Like, the House and Senate need to pass this bill so that the American people see what a difference it makes to have them in power. They need the results, the economy to kick in based on the tax cuts and everything else that are having in there. Trump, meanwhile, continues just to fight when it comes to taking on Harvard. Two big fronts. And I'm going to talk to John Solomon about this in just a second when he comes up. He's rescinding $3 billion in grants. And remember, Harvard's got a $54 billion endowment. They're going to court today because Harvard obviously is like, we need the $3 billion. But then Trump is also saying, hey, it's time that we started tracking who you guys are letting in, because a large percentage of Harvard students are foreigners. And basically, our government is subsidizing Harvard through all of this money. Take a listen to him talking about this.
Well, look, part of the problem with Harvard is that there are about 31%, almost 31% of foreigners coming to Harvard. We give them billions of dollars, which is ridiculous. We do grants, which we're probably not going to be doing much grants anymore to Harvard. But they're 31%, but they refuse to tell us who the people are. We want to know who the people. Now, a lot of the foreign students we wouldn't have a problem with. I'm not going to have a problem with foreign students, but it shouldn't be 31%. It's too much, because we have Americans that want to go there and to other places, and they can't go there because you have 31% foreign. Now, no foreign government contributes money to Harvard. We do. So why are they doing so many?
All right. You get the point there, right? Trump taking on Harvard made it very clear that there's too many foreigners and we're sending a ton of our taxpayer money, right? We're subsidizing them, basically. I'm going to break that down with John Solomon. He's coming up. By the way, one other big thing making headlines last night, Brigitte Macron, the wife, the much older wife of Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, pushing him in the face. Now, I was sort of taken back by the lack of media coverage on this, and I know everyone made a bunch of jokes about it. But I am taken back by the lack of concern there is. I mean, if violence is wrong, then it should be wrong all around. And why are we not talking about this? The Macrons are brushing it off like some kind of like just cutesy playtime thing. That's clearly not what happened. But I just would argue that if you're going to say that it's wrong one way, it should be wrong the other. And again, I get why it's funny for a lot of people, but we should take this a little seriously. All right, as I mentioned, John Solomon coming up. But we got Chicks on the Right tomorrow. John and Jim McLaughlin, President's New Pollsters, are going to come together to break down the results of a brand new poll on Friday. Victor Davis Hansen's coming up on the show. Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education, and Cheryl Atkinson. You remember her from Sinclair. She's joining us. We've got a great couple of weeks coming up. Before we get to John Solomon, I'm going to tell you this. Even when I travel, I have to have my Beam Dream Powder. It is unbelievable. I'm so excited because I changed something in my journey that's made a real difference. Beam's Dream Powder. Look, this is a bag I crushed. This is actually another bag I crushed. I literally cannot go anywhere now and not take it with me. The difference between a night with Beam's Dream Powder and a night without is unmistakable. It's proudly founded in America. It's run by people who share our values, hard work, integrity, and delivering results. There's a reason that 17.5 million nights of sleep have been improved. Professionals, athletes, regular people take it because it's science-backed, healthy nighttime blend. I mean, all the stuff that you've probably tried with a pill before: melatonin, magnesium, reishi, apigen, L-theanine, all in one amazing blend. I love the cinnamon cocoa. I've tried the brownie, the peppermint. They're all amazing. It not only helps you sleep really well, but you wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go. And here's the deal. Beam is giving all my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of 40% off. 40% off. You cannot get a better deal. Any of the flavors I recommend. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer at checkout for 40% off. Trust me, guys, I'm telling you, when you do this, you will thank me. You will have such a great night's sleep and wake up raring to go. Support a great American company, invest in yourself, and start getting the best night's sleep. But let me tell you about one great guy, and it's not John Solomon, because he is a great guy and he's coming up, but my buddy Leo Grillo. Leo was on a road trip and he came across a Doberman. He rescued the dog. It was severely underweight, and that became the beginning of an amazing journey. Leo then founded Delta Rescue. The dog was named Delta because it stands for Dedication, Everlasting Love to Animals. And I'm telling you, if you go to deltarescue.org, you'll see what I've seen. These videos that show you why it's the world's largest no-kill sanctuary, not shelter, sanctuary. It is amazing. Dogs, cats, horses, you name it. Leo Grillo has now dedicated his life to taking care of all of these animals that have been abused, neglected, abandoned, malnutrition. He gives them the care for life. That is so cool. And the thing is, they rely totally on contributions from people like me and you. No USAID grants, no Political Pro subscriptions. I'm not kidding. I was so moved by the videos at deltarescue.org. I made a personal contribution. And that's what's going to keep this thing going. But if we want it to go more than one generation, do me a favor, click that estate planning kit and download it and just take a look and see if you've got an old stock or an old 401k. Talk to your financial planner. You might get some kind of short-term tax benefit, but help Leo Grillo make Delta Rescue an enduring mission. Go to deltarescue.org to learn more today. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in John Solomon, who's a former bureau chief of the Associated Press, the bureau chief of the Washington Times. He now leads and founded justthenews.com. It airs a show on Real America's Voice called Just the News. He knows it all. He's covered it all. Without further ado, John Solomon. John, great to see you. I hope you had a meaningful and thoughtful Memorial Day.
I did indeed. What a great time to celebrate all the sacrifices that made this country great.
It is amazing how far we've come since the last Memorial Day. I think it was the last one where Kamala wished us a happy long weekend to watching Trump both at West Point and then at Arlington really reflect on where we are as a country in terms of strength and respect worldwide.
Yeah, no doubt. And also things like accountability, too. Just before Memorial Day, Pete Hegseth announcing that we're going to get to the bottom of what really happened in Afghanistan, what really happened at Abbey Gate for the 13 souls lost that day unnecessarily. That will be a great measure of comfort to get to the truth, not the bogus stories that we got from the Biden administration. So I think we headed into this Memorial Day. We're a different country. You see peace through strength again, and a world reacting to the fact that America is back in a leadership position rather than a hunched down globalist sort of backwards leaning country. And so I think 1 year has made an enormous difference. You're right.
One of the things that I was excited about talking to you about is sort of because your background, you led the AP, you led so many key media institutions, and now obviously at Just the News, you kind of continue that investigative legacy that you've had for a while. But when you talk about the investigation that they have in Afghanistan, I kind of was thinking about this as you were just mentioning it, that there wasn't a ton of media attention, was there? It wasn't like people were saying, the finally getting to the bottom of this, what happened? It was almost like, oh boy, like we're not going to bring it up. And when you think about that with your background at all of these big legacy media institutions, is it because they don't want us to know? Because it's not, is there a broader reason, or is it just like laziness?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think laziness is some of it. Inexperience. The media has gotten much younger, and as a result, people don't have the reporting chops to go and challenge official narratives until it takes time to become a skilled reporter. And then I think the third part is there are preferred narratives in the media today, and I think that is a really, of all the consequences in the media today, the preferred narrative is exactly that. Joe Biden was fine until he wasn't. Hunter Biden's laptop was disinformation until it wasn't. Russia collusion was real until it wasn't. These narratives that are sort of set because they meet the political and ideological wishes of a large number of the media have created probably the largest period of time where the news media has been chronically wrong in American history. You'd have to go back to the yellow journalism era to find a worse period of inaccurate, reversed reporting that literally gets reversed years later. And I think a big part of that is that today, too many reporters insert their ideological wishes in place of a neutral sort of presentation of the facts. They don't trust the American people to make up their mind, so they try to lead them by the nose. And I think that has destroyed the fabric of credibility that the news media gathered over the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s when pretty legitimate reporting occurred.
You, like I said, you're in a very unique position for us to have this discussion because you led the AP in Washington. And I think about it now where they got pushed out of the rotation of the White House pool. Yeah. But you are now leading Just the News, which is in the rotation for. So how do you kind of? It's weird. Can you look at that situation objectively right now and say, hey, if I was at the AP, this is how I'd look at this? Because these new changes are benefiting not just the news, but a lot of new organizations that are trying to break in that have been in previous times locked out of the discussion. How do you, as
without a
somebody
doubt.
who can look at this from your perch, look at how the White House has changed the landscape of how outlets are covering the White House?
Yeah, listen, I think it's a sea change, and it's one that will benefit American media long term. Whenever we've had a crisis in our marketplace, whether it's the marketplace of ideas or the commercial marketplace, our founding fathers intended us to use competition to be the greatest solution. And for most of the Biden years, there was this ecosystem of new competitors coming in, and they were suppressed. Their advertising was suppressed, their speech was suppressed, their social reach was suppressed because Joe Biden and his supporters didn't want the truth to come out. Donald Trump has unleashed that suppression. He has basically overcome it and allowed each of us to just get in and do reporting. And I think it will help fix the profession long term. The counterbalances of having a competitive media rather than a singular drone-like media is going to be beneficial to the American public. And I think Donald Trump and the entire press team at the White House, Carolyn's done a great job. They're allowing us to compete in the marketplace of ideas. And I think the American people are the ultimate winner. And you see things already. You see false narratives get stamped out quicker because of the standing the media has. You see better questions being asked in the press room because there are more competitors in that press room. I think at the end of the day, while outlets like mine benefit, I think the ultimate beneficiary is going to be the American public.
I agree. I think the competition is the key thing here because they can't get away with it. Speaking of which, last night there was this smack, push, whatever you want to call it. Brigitte Macron pushing her husband. Yep. They're playing it off as a playful, like, love tap that's how they apparently express their endearment towards each other.
About that.
And so maybe I'm just too cynical. But I was thinking about this last night, and I know everybody is making jokes about it, and to some degree, I can get it. But I also, and maybe it's just because I am so cynical about how this stuff is covered. And I said to myself, there is a serious nature of this. Like we've seen women talk about domestic violence and issues of importance that have gone unreported. And I thought to myself last night, if the roles were reversed, if Emmanuel Macron has pushed his wife in the face as they were getting off this plane, there would be worldwide condemnation and outrage. And I thought to myself, okay, I get some of the jokes. You know, I'm glad that I stayed on Mrs. Macron's good side, I guess, is probably the other thing. But I did think to myself, there is a serious part of the story that isn't being reported.
Yeah, listen, I think you're right. I think that the media has a hard time reversing the roles. If a suspect treats a cop really badly, they have a hard time covering that. If a woman beats a man, they have a hard time covering that because they're not the preferred narratives. They're not the comfortable sort of mantras that the media has gotten into. But what happened on that plane deserves to be scrutinized. And again, it could be something playful. It could be something, a sign of stress in the marriage. Again, presidents and prime ministers are humans too, and we all go through relationships and the ups and downs of them. But I think the early coverage has been to try to dismiss it rather than to get to the bottom of what really happened. And, in France, there's lots of opportunity to ask the security service, what did they witness? What really went on? Who's telling the truth? That process hasn't begun yet. Our reporter in France today is asking those questions of the security service today. Yeah, we need to.
I agree. And the thing that was interesting is look, I every couple has their little playful moments. I guess what stood out to me was he didn't look like his face wasn't like, ha, 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 I get it, honey, you're pushing me. Like that looked like he was definitely taken back. And so
you look at how they exit the plane too, it does look like a frosty moment. And again, those things happen. And, politicians are people too. And maybe there's something going on in the relationship. We don't know. But I think getting to the truth of it is most important.
Right. All right. Well, continuing down this media thread that we're on, I sort of have been intrigued by the coverage now. All of these folks in the media being like, oh, yeah, mea culpa about, you mentioned some of the previous sins. But how this Biden downfall has continued. And the Wall Street Journal is out with this major story now about how major donors are reluctant to give money to his presidential library. But it was interesting on two fronts that I thought that I wanted to get your take on. One is some people believe, like, this is the line, just so that I'm not accused of taking this out of context. Some people don't want to give money to his presidential library because allies privately worry it will not open during his lifetime. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, it talks about Biden faces pressure that other past presidents didn't. He aims to quickly amass an inheritance for his grandchildren, according to people familiar. So that, wait a second, there's two things going on here that I think are fascinating. One is, like, this guy, we talked about Biden Inc. This is something that John Solomon and Just the News have been at the forefront forever. And now they're publicly saying, yeah, we were trying to amass a fortune so that no one in Biden world ever had to work again. That's one narrative. And number two is, if you're openly concerned that the guy's going to die before the library opens, then clearly there was a little bit more to the health issue.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Listen, it's ironic to look at Jake Tapper's book, which is sort of the media's effort to move the narrative back to 2024. Okay, he shouldn't have run in 2024. That's where we've gone from he was perfectly okay to it was a sin to try to run him in 2024. But if you go through Jake Tapper's book, like our great Jerry Dunleavy did this morning, you actually find the proof of a much larger, earlier original sin. In 2020, in 2017, there were already signs of his declining mental faculties. By 2020, according to the information in the book, there was a need to use a teleprompter for interviews. Now, I don't use a teleprompter for interviews. You don't use a teleprompter for interviews. Donald Trump doesn't use a teleprompter for interviews. There was something wrong with Joe Biden. And the fact of the matter is, even in the book that claims to uncover the cover-up, there's another cover-up, which is really, by calling 2024 the sin, you're ignoring the fact that the signs of mental decline were much, much earlier, whether it's the Easter Bunny incident on the lawn of the White House during the egg roll, or the need for teleprompter during the 2020 media interviews. The media were covering this up for 4 or 5 years, and their effort to move it back to an acceptable 1 year back isn't the truth. The truth is that Joe Biden was mentally diminished for several years. And I think the way the media is covering it now is their sort of limited hangout. And in fact of the matter is, the real truth is that Joe Biden was sick probably for several years, probably 4 or 5 years.
You know, the funny thing about this is that when asked about it, Jake Tapper will say, well, I wish some of those 200 people that we've interviewed came forward before that. And my answer to him is, okay, let's just play the odds, John Solomon. If you interviewed 200 people starting the day after the election, and they suddenly all want to talk and tell you all of these things. Yeah. Just play the odds for a second. 200 people told you how bad everything was the day after the election. Do you think maybe 10%, 20 of them would have told you if you had asked before the election? Yes. Because it seems to me that this is a pretty lame excuse. Like, suddenly everybody came forward afterwards and have all of these stories, to your point about the teleprompter, and we saw it with our own eyes, not just that moment with the Easter Bunny, where the White House Easter Bunny's guiding him around, but also you remember the dead congresswoman that he's calling out in an event, asking where she was. That didn't take a lot of questions. That was simply, how do you go to an event to honor someone who died and ask where they were without going, God, that's a little odd. So I just find the media excuse from all this. And the bigger question to me is, does anybody pay the price for this? Because some people are pointing the finger at the Biden aides and saying, oh, they covered it up. And then obviously I think that the media is equally culpable for ignoring it because it was so blatant.
Yeah. Listen, I think there is inherent in Jake Tapper's explanation a really alarming admission, which is that today's journalists are handout journalists. They wait for the handout to come, and that's how preferred narratives get sustained by those who are the spin meisters inside of administration. Curious reporters don't wait for the handout to come. They don't wait for people to come forward. They go get the information. They go find out, hey, if the FBI is in possession of Hunter Biden's laptop, is it really Russian disinformation? And I was able to get that answered in 2020. It took the rest of the media until 2022 and 2023 to come to that recognition. Curious reporters go out and they say, hey, there's something odd about the notion that the president of the United States, who's getting security briefings, was considered to be a Russian stooge. That just doesn't seem possible. They would have cut him off before this. And you go back and you find out there was no truth to that. I think it's a lack of curiosity, and it's that mentality of handout journalism that has created the ability for people like the Biden administration to keep preferred narratives sustained. There's a lack of curiosity and a lack of neutrality that has kept the media from really doing its job. Be more curious, be more assertive. I always start with the answer that maybe what you're telling me isn't true. When Condi Rice stood up a couple of days after 9/11 and said, no one envisioned flying a plane into a building, I said, that's not possible. And of course, I was able to find out that going all the way back to 1993, Al-Qaeda was talking about flying planes into buildings. And that led me down a path of unraveling a lot of the failures of the 9/11 era. You have to be curious. And today's reporters are more interested in keeping the status quo, getting to their book parties, than being curious enough to challenge official narratives.
I love the phrase handout journalism, because I'm thinking to myself, in all my time, that's so
is.
true. It is, though. I'd call a reporter and be like, hey, I got this story. Let me put a little pretty bow on it and hand it to you.
Yep.
But it's the same thing. I think back to COVID, John, where it was like, so let me get this straight. There's a lab that produces viruses, or it could be a bat.
Yes. It's almost like, laughable, isn't it? Yeah.
But you're like, hey, they told me it was a bat, so I got to go with that. But I want to move to something you guys have been covering, the whole big, beautiful bill that's passed the House now.
Sure.
From your reporting, I listen to all the Sunday shows because of my addiction. And I continue to believe that it has to pass. I mean, not will pass, has to pass. The Republicans need this. The president needs this. But I am concerned about when I heard Rand Paul, Rick Scott, Ron Johnson all talk about spending and debt issues. Where do you guys, from your reporting, see the status of this bill?
That's a really great question. Right now, the Senate is about 2 votes short to pass it through, even if J.D. Vance were to preside and become an extra vote. I think the more likely scenario is that they look for some tool that doesn't make the House and Senate have to make a lot more cuts, but that gives the president the ability unilaterally to impose some savings. And so there's a story up on our site today. There's language floating around Capitol Hill. It started about 2 weeks ago. It actually started with a couple of conversations on my show, and then it just kept going. But, a president, even if he delivers a bridge, let's say the bridge is funded for $1 billion and he gets it done at $800 million, he can't return that $200 million back to the Treasury. He has to go through a rescission vote, which is the silliest thing in the world. If you deliver what Congress wants, but you got a better price for it, shouldn't the American taxpayers just get their money back? There is language floating around to empower a president not to have to take 1,000 rescission votes to give money back, because, as you know, Congress often doesn't like giving money back. But to say, well, President, if you certify you did what Congress did and you delivered exactly what Congress did, you did it for less money, send it back. You could save hundreds of billions of dollars a year doing that with the president without having to take all those painful congressional votes. I think a novel idea like that or something like it could be the sort of thing that says, all right, we have a path for cutting spending, but we're going to get the president's agenda done. And we're going to trust President Trump to cut, and take us off the hook. Because the truth of the matter is, most Republicans in Congress don't want to take hard votes to cut the size of the deficit the way it needs to be for the future of America. But Donald Trump will have no problem cutting it. And I think if you give him a tool or two, Congress can always reverse something if they don't like it. But it changes the dynamic from Congress has to accept the money back to Donald Trump can send it. And if Congress wants to send it back, they have to take that vote. I think something like that could be a game changer in this final 8-week rush to get this done by July 4th.
The House basically, you had Speaker Johnson go over to the Senate conference meeting and say, guys, this was like, honestly, like I got this thing through by the skin of my teeth. So please don't make a ton of changes to it. And then Trump goes out and says to the Senate, quote, make the changes they want, right?
That's Donald Trump.
And exactly. I was like, I got PTSD flashback to healthcare. But so let's just walk through the process. The House sent it to the Senate. They're going to make changes because you've got spending concerns on one side from likes of Ron Johnson and Rand Paul and Rick Scott. Then you've got Olympia Snowe and Lisa Murkowski that want less cuts. So if the Senate tweaks it, sends it back to the House, I mean, I just feel like we're going to be playing a game of ping pong, and they need to get this done. Yeah. Or do you see it like this language that you're talking about, it being the panacea, where they say, hey, we'll tweak it a little, but we're going to give the president this tool as sort of maybe the compromise?
Yeah. One possibility is, listen, if they break up the bill in the Senate, then it's got to go back to the House. If they pass a similar version, but with amendments, it goes to a conference committee where the wheeling and dealing occurs in the back room with smoke coming up the chimney at 2 a.m. I think that's a more likely scenario, that getting to a conference committee will be a better solution, because then you could do the wheeling, dealing in the background. And then something like this notion that empowering the president to do empowerment to do rescission without having to go to Congress for each expenditure could become a game changer behind the scenes. You can say, and we're going to trust Trump to do it. Let's try it for a couple of years. If not, we'll cut more ourselves. But I think the real question is, do they make enough changes to the bill that it has to go back to the House, or do they substantially pass a bill and then try to get it in the conference committee where real wheeling and dealing with 6 or 8 powerful people from the 2 chambers gets the job done? I don't think we know the path yet. I think if Ron Johnson has his way and Rand Paul has his way, and I assume Mike Lee might be one of those 2. I'm trying to reach him today. You may see the bill break up. Then it's a game of ping pong for quite some time, and will be just like 2017 again. Remember, the President Trump didn't have his first real major legislative victory in 2017 until the tax cuts at the very end of the year. And I think Donald Trump wants to avoid that. He wants to enact the agenda and then worry about the cuts afterwards. So we'll see which side wins. It's either a game of ping pong or backroom dealing, one of those 2 options.
I do think, though, that to your previous comment about most guys not liking to do tough things, I am one of these people. I share Rand Paul's concern about the debt. I feel like
I do too.
And this is the problem, is that there's not an incentive. Because it's not like you ever get good press by how much you cut, or even making like a lot of these Doge things that are common sense. It's like, hey, there's 5 organizations that are doing the same thing. Let's eliminate 4 of the 5. And everyone goes, oh, they're massive cuts.
Yeah. I have a theory. I actually think that if more Republicans actually jumped into the breach and started cutting things, they'd actually get public affirmation. They'd actually win political support. I remember 40 years ago when Bill Proxmire would put out the Golden Fleece Award, and people would read that and laugh at it because they appreciated some guy saying, you're watching out for my money. I actually think Republicans are just too cowardly to try it in a large enough fashion. I think if they step into the void, I think most Americans would celebrate saving unnecessary spending and putting it back into the till and realizing that maybe my great-grandchildren won't have as big a debt as we have today. I think there's a greater political reward than Republicans have allowed themselves to accept or even test. And I think that that's a failure. But I do think, someone like Ron Johnson, he's going to hold the line for a while. He's going to shake this up a little bit. He's very serious about it. And you just think about the spending addiction we have. At the start of COVID, we were doing about $4.95 trillion a year in spending. Now we're at 7. COVID's gone. Why do we need that extra $2 trillion? We used to live on $5 trillion just fine. And it's just kind of crazy that Republicans can't get off the addiction of just letting money continue to flow without any accounting for it or any value to it. I mean, you look at some of the stuff that Joe Biden put out in the various big spending bills he had, and the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really the Inflation Augmentation Act. Republicans can't even take that money back, even though it's not spent. And so I think the Republicans are the problem. They got to have the courage to go and do what the American people. And here's my prediction: if they just did a little cutting, I bet you the American public would give them a reward, not a negative.
I agree with you, because once people realize how, here's my point to overall. I get it. We live in the greatest country in the world, and it's going to cost us. I want good roads, good bridges. I want a strong national defense. Okay, fine. But don't piss away my money. Don't mock me for sending it to Washington. Treat me with respect. Treat my money with respect. And I agree with you. You will be rewarded for that. And I just don't think enough people see the political reward for leading that fight. And it's not just the cheap stuff. I've said this before, John, and you remember this because of your storied history covering a lot of this. But back in the day, you remember Newt Gingrich used to walk around with an ice bucket. And,
he did.
And he would tell people, look, this is $95,000 of salaries for people who deliver ice to offices that have ice makers. How stupid is that? But it was a symbol of how ridiculous spending had gotten. And I think this is the problem. On the flip side, right? So I think that this is, again, where the cowardice comes in. I wonder and I want to hear what your take is are Republicans going to get themselves into the fetal position when it comes to these Democrat attacks on things like cutting Medicaid, which is just eliminating people who shouldn't be on the program, right? So I just don't know that Republicans know how to take a punch.
Yeah, listen, they haven't for many, many years. Donald Trump does, but the congressional Republicans seem to have a glass jaw all the time. And that's why Democrats have rolled them for most of the last 2 decades. I mean, Congress has been the most ineffective of the 3 branches of government for most of the last 2 decades. And I think that that's why the deficit got so big so quickly. But you can get rid of a glass chin by shifting some of the burden. Let the president, who gets elected every 4 years, make the hard choices, give him the power to do that. We'll tell him what we want to appropriate. We're not giving up our Article 1 purse string powers. But if Donald Trump can deliver things because he's a CEO and he's got a whole bunch of CEOs in his cabinet more efficiently, then by all means, let's just let him do it. Take the pressure off of us. I think that could be a winning notion. The other thing is, let's think about this. Marco Rubio, who came from the Senate, came into the State Department and cut half of the State Department and got rid of USAID, and the State Department's functioning just fine today. In fact, it's getting more Americans back from imprisonment and hostages, and it's I got some of the most incredible negotiations in America, in the world, going on with Syria and Russia and Ukraine. Man, and they're not all going to succeed, but they're doing real diplomatic work, and they cut the budget in half. Yeah. Apparently, we don't need as much government. Yeah. We just need Marco Rubio's courage.
All right. Well, speaking of foreigners, you guys have a story up at Just the News about this conflict that between Trump and Harvard. This is fascinating because it's twofold. Number one, they're going after the $3 billion in grants and funding. And 2 is they're saying, give us the list of all these foreigners that are coming, because if we're giving all this public money to Harvard, we need to know who's coming in. Give us an update on where we are with that and how you play out, because I'll tell you my take in a second. I want to hear yours.
Yeah, listen, I think Donald Trump has a winning hand here. First, he's going to take that $3 billion and give it to trade schools so that the plumbers and the manufacturers and all the people who could be at the heart of the next manufacturing renaissance can get trained today and get into the marketplace for this extraordinary resupply chain that is going on in America right now. So he's got a winning hand that way. That's going to play very well in Middle America. But at the end of the day, what Donald Trump is managing to do is show these elitist universities that grew up on our soil, grew up with our tax dollars, grew up with the benefit of our tax exemptions, have become custodians and slaves to foreign powers and to foreign countries like China. And Donald Trump is going to expose that piece by piece, block by block. And I think that that's a really winning issue as well. Wait a second. Harvard's more allegiant to Qatar and Saudi Arabia and China, if those are the countries that they reveal. That's going to hit people real hard. Like, what about Americans? What about the kids who work real hard to try to get into an Ivy League school? They were replaced by some foreigner on a student visa. That is another winning issue. And I think Harvard's got, speaking of glass jaws, Harvard's got a pretty big glass jaw right now. It can sue. It can't win the big public relations war in the court of public opinion. Donald Trump is already winning that one.
I think that your way of dissecting this was so spot on, because I always say that there's the policy and the politics. And no one in America is crying tears for an elitist institution with a $54 billion endowment. They're like, oh my God, how's Harvard going to get on? I mean, but I do wonder how. So I think that my take on this is this. On the politics on both, I think he wins. I think on the politics, on the grant side, I think they're going to have a harder problem, because Harvard's going to go to court and say, we won, quote unquote, these grants fair and square. There was a competition to get a grant to study, mice climbing up trees, and we won that. So you can't just take it away because you don't like us. But on the foreign student one, I think that there's absolutely the department can come in and say, these people, you don't get to decide who comes into our country. And so I think he wins on the politics on both, but I think he wins on the substance on the latter.
I think that's right. And listen, if he gets 50%, that is still a major victory, given the trajectory of these Ivy League institutions pivoting away from Americans to these foreign allegiances. And I think that even at 50%, it's a major win. And I think even within the grants, I think there can be some great dissection. If you're trying to solve cancer, I think you're right. The courts are going to do that. If you're trying to figure out why certain people wear pink hair, do we really need that in a $37 trillion a deficit? I think even on some of the grants he can win, sort of the golden fleece sort of notion of grants, I think the courts will probably save some of the grants. I think you're right. And I think, but a partial victory for Donald Trump is a large victory for the American people, because these institutions needed to be reined in. They are become all omnipotent and unresponsive to the American people who fund them. I mean, think about it. They get $3 billion a year. There was $3 billion to cut. They get $3 billion a year. That's a lot of money to a single institution. What's it doing for that? What's the American people benefiting from that? Donald Trump
that gets back to the point. That gets back to the point of, like, why isn't Congress appropriated this money? At some point, they got to go, hey, like, Trump's out there fighting it, but you guys have a role in this. Cut it.
Yeah. Listen, the founding fathers wouldn't recognize this Congress. Maybe their worst fears would be that a Congress one day would give up all of its power, give up all of its courage, and yield. But I think those members of Congress have to look in the mirror, have to look into the mirror of history and say, we were empowered to do these things, and yet we haven't exercised our power. We keep yielding and we keep failing. And it's only been in the last 20 years where that failure has become so pronounced. And for much of that time, Republicans are in charge. The Mitch McConnells of the world and the Paul Ryans of the world. I remember watching Paul Ryan growing up. I'm going to cut. He didn't cut. And I can go through many others. I don't mean to pick on Paul Ryan, but you can pick on many others. The rhetoric and the action have become a farther gap than any time I can remember. And at some point, someone else has to step into the void. And I think Donald Trump is doing that now. He's pushing Congress to say, let me do the cutting. I got the courage. I'll do it.
Yep. No, I agree. I want to get your take on something that is literally your wheelhouse. You guys got a story up on Just the News about Dan Bongino reviewing 3 unsolved mysteries, right?
Important.
1, the White House cocaine. I can solve this for you real quick, by the way, Dan.
That's right.
I think I know whose it was. 2,
Me too.
Okay, together. Hey, Dan, John Solomon, Sean Spicer just teamed up. We solved that, and we call you. SCOTUS's leak on Roe and the January 6th pipe bomb. But this is literally John Solomon's wheelhouse, because this is what you built your career on, investigative reporting. But I want to take you back to one that's not there first.
Yep, please.
The Epstein one. Dan Bongino spent a lot of time talking about this, and then the other day he was out there saying, hey, look, I reviewed the evidence. Epstein killed himself. And I want to ask it to you this way, because I read a lot of stuff online, and I thought to myself, one of the things is, the critique seemed to largely be, but you only read almost like what was in the evidence box, right? Meaning, of course you came to that conclusion. So based on your reporting, on your background as an investigator, is there more to this, or should we finally just accept that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself?
I'd like to see one last batch of documents, which Kash Patel located in the Southern District of New York and in the FBI field office in New York. I think Pam Bondi's had those documents for a while. They were found around the time that she did that sort of first release that sort of backfired on her. I'd like to see what's in there before making a final thing. I will say this. I've done what's in the public realm doesn't create a big enough set of proof to suggest he killed himself. Now, earlier in my career, I took a look at a guy named Trenadu, who the government had concluded had killed himself in prison, and we proved that he was murdered. And his brother and Congress worked relentlessly to show a real cover-up. A guy got beaten up and killed in prison. They staged it to look like a suicide. Some of the elements that we found in that case, which was a compelling effort, I was at the Associated Press when we did this, are missing here. Now, it doesn't mean they're not there. They're just not in the public where we can see it. There is one batch of documents that Kash Patel located on Epstein. I think he turned them over to the Justice Department. Hopefully they come out soon. And I think after that, we'll be able to make a more informed decision. I think the greater story isn't whether he killed himself or whether he was murdered. I think it's the way the government went about investigating him the last 20 years. They went about investigating him in a way that would protect powerful people. They didn't ask all the hard questions. And I think when you look at the body of documents that we have there, and that's already starting to become apparent. Just like journalists were not curious enough to really challenge Joe Biden, there wasn't enough curiosity Maybe there was too much politeness. Maybe there was too much politics involved in the Justice Department back in that 06, 07, 08 timeframe. I have questions about what the Florida Attorney General's office under Pam Moody may have done as well. And so I want to look at that as well. Excuse me, Pam Bondi. I'd like to find out what happened there. Those are, I think, a more powerful question. I think the government turned a blind eye to far more serious sex trafficking. Yeah, they got the guy, but they didn't hold those accountable who were benefiting from that awful system. That's a much more important question, long time for history.
All right, on the other three cases, real quick, is there anything that you see hope for?
Listen, the January 6th pipe bombing case should be easy to solve. The person's on a phone. We can triangulate phones. And they originally told Congress that they couldn't find the phone data. We now know they didn't really do that level of work. I think they will solve the January 6th pipe bomb case. And I have a funny feeling it could turn out to be someone that had some relationship to federal law enforcement, maybe a undercover informant. We'll see. Let's wait and see where it comes out. I think the cocaine will be easy to solve. Listen, there's going to be fingerprints. There's going to be camera footage. It's not that hard to solve. And then I think the third one is a little trickier. I don't know all the body of evidence on that one in a while. It's been a while since I've dug in. I do think there's a significant trail of evidence that hasn't been given to the public. Maybe crowdsource some of this. Let some of this stuff out. If the FBI can't solve it, let's crowdsource it. I bet you we can solve it.
Last thing I want to ask you about, you posted a story under your byline paying tribute and acknowledging the passing of Phil Robertson of Duck Dynasty over the weekend. As somebody who's covered these issues for a while, did you ever meet Phil? Did you know him?
I did. I got to meet him at a White House Correspondents' Dinner back when I was the editor of the Washington Times. He was a jovial guy, a God-fearing guy, an old school sort of soul. And I only met him once, but he had that authenticity. And I think when you look back at Duck Dynasty, or you look back at people who capture our fascination in some way for a period of time, they bring an authenticity that you just look at them and say, that's real. I get them. That's the type of person. And even if I'm different than them, I just appreciate that they're comfortable being who they are. I think Phil Robertson was that sort of guy.
What kind of impact do you think he had on the movement?
You know, I think he made it okay to just be a regular guy and not have to be an elitist. There was a period of time after the Bush years where I think elitism kind of creeped into the Republican Party and it became more and more disconnected from the center of America. We were more about pie charts and PowerPoints than we were about real people. And then Duck Dynasty comes about like, these are real people. This is what life's really like in Louisiana. And I think it reminded the movement that those are the people that we're supposed to be representing. And I think those reminders are important. We need them more often than we get them.
Yeah. John Solomon of Just the News. Thanks for being here. I love your insight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I love your show, Sean. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in today. As I said, Chicks on the Right today. Tomorrow, the McLaughlin brothers, both of them on Friday to break down a brand new poll. And you know what? Before we leave, by the way, my brand new newsletter's out today, SeanSpicer.com. Sign up for that. Before I leave you, though, this is how the White House asked us to reflect on Memorial Day. I want to take the show out on that. I'll see you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.